In an effort to curb crime, some cities are turning to curfews for minors. For example, after a recent spike in violent crime, Newark implemented a curfew from 11 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. for unsupervised youths. The New York Times writes, quote, "In recent months, teenagers in Newark have been involved in incidents involving gun possession and joyriding in stolen cars," city officials said. Youth curfews enacted to deter crime date back to the late 19th century. The National Youth Rights Association has counted 400 such laws in effect nationwide.
And other cities are thinking about it too. One Chicago alderman is pushing to implement a curfew after a couple was attacked last week by a group of teenagers. Leaders in Columbia, South Carolina have also proposed a curfew for teens after a 16-year-old was killed at a graduation party. And so I feel like making it illegal to be outside as a kid, it just feels so wrong. I know I had an 11 p.m. curfew when I was in high school. We hardly went out and about that late at night, especially on a school night. But I miss the days when it was just elders in the community enforcing the curfew. I feel like having a criminal record as a teenager because you just might be out of the house after 11 p.m., it doesn't feel like we live in the free world if that's a thing.
I think typically they would just pick you up and take you home or maybe give you a citation. I don't think they throw you in jail for violating the curfew, but we can check up on the details of that. But I think the problem here is in places like Newark and some of these other larger cities, it's simply not feasible for communities to simply police young people going out. Washington, D.C. has seen a massive uptick in carjackings, and most of those tend to be committed by young offenders. There was a foster parent who recently spoke at a panel about the rise of carjackings and said that one of his own foster kids was caught late at night trying to carjack somebody, and he was blown away because he didn't even know what his child was out doing. And perhaps that was a bad example of parenting, but kids sneak out of the house, they get involved in bad things after midnight, and I don't see this curfew as necessarily a problem given what's been happening with crime in the United States, and especially with the rise of crime among youth offenders. I think it's understandable that a city would want to try to implement something, anything, to try to get those rates down.
Yeah, I think that from the perspective of an older person now, not a young person trying to sneak out and hang out with my friends, nothing good really happens after 11 p.m. for someone who's 16, 17. There's no reason they need to be out that late. I think that what I'm worried about is that this behavior does end up getting criminalized, that someone who's out and about is out past curfew. What are they doing out past curfew? Maybe they get ticketed for loitering. 16 and 17-year-olds don't have a lot of money to be spending. There's also not a lot of places for them to go that are open. And a lot of times if you're in a public park that closes at sunset, it's not legal to be there. Most of the time the cop tells you to just go home. But I do worry about this behavior ultimately being criminalized. I know in France, they've, tried this in some of the southern French cities. They've instituted curfews for youth between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. So I'm really interested to see what the impact of these curfews will be, because the type of scenarios that triggered these laws to come into effect, or for some of the aldermen in Chicago to talk about this and lawmakers in South Carolina to write legislation around this, it's crimes. And so if it's the type of person who's going out to commit a crime, I'm sure they'd be willing to break the law of a curfew. If they're going to shoot someone, they're going out playing with guns, they're attacking people, I don't know if a curfew would stop that.
No, it probably wouldn't stop them from leaving, but what it does do is it gives enforcement mechanisms to police officers to say, how old are you? Why are you out this late? And then give them the ability to either take them home or take them somewhere else where they can't go on to commit a crime. So they are able to actually take them off of the street, which reduces the opportunity for them to do something. According to a local news outlet in Newark, what will happen is if a teen is without an adult during curfew hours, they will be stopped, they will request their home address, and will contact the city's Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, which will take teens to their home. So the police officers themselves are not even taking the police home. And it says if the parent or guardian is not at home or can't be reached, the teens will instead be taken to a re-engagement center, which will stay open until 2 a.m. during the curfew. And if parents are still not reached, teens will be transported to a local hospital to receive a medical clearance. And if they are not picked up by a parent or guardian after 4 hours, the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency will be contacted. They're pretty explicit that this is not a police event. There will be no fines or penalties for teens who break it. The rule is just meant to make sure that teens who are up to no good late at night are, again, not given the opportunity or free rein to commit a crime. So, again, I don't see a problem with this. They're not criminalizing teens being out late. They're not charging them money for teens who might be from low-income families. And it seems like they have a lot of measures in place available to make sure that they have somewhere to go if they're not able to go back home.
Yeah, I think I'm just worried that we're going to see police complain that they don't have the money to enforce this, that they're taking, a lot of kids home, that it's taking a lot of, police presence, that they will need to institute fines for it to pay for itself. We always see laws come into place and then the law changes over time because it becomes normalized that it's a crime to just be outside. I think, for me, it's a parental decision, age 16, 17. I remember times where I was out late. I wasn't committing a crime. We were just kind of walking around, talking. There wasn't someone's house that was big enough for us to have our own space where we weren't keeping the parents up who like to go to bed early. A lot of the kids I know from my hometown, which was very divided across class, a lot of the wealthier kids, they had basements they could hang out in that were finished. They had backyards that they would have bonfires in, and they had cars to drive home. But a lot of the working class kids in the neighborhood I grew up in, we didn't have that. We're out walking around. We're, out in the baseball and soccer fields and public parks. And so I do think it's sad that this is going to disproportionately likely affect more working class kids. And so I wish there was a better way. I wish there was, more places for young kids to go for enrichment, more places for kids to be social out in public that aren't expensive. I think what we've seen is a lot of public spaces have restrictions about when you can be in them. And so it's almost like you have to exist somehow on private property or not at all. And I really think as a, community at the local level, people need to be getting together and thinking, where are our public spaces? Where are our community centers? Why is it that the only thing we can do to pass time leisurely in America is spend money? And so I think, this is a step that might stop some crime, but I really think addressing the problem at its root would be making sure there's more community spaces, especially for young people.
Yeah, I guess it is unfortunate that teens won't have that experience of what we typically sort of regard as just normal rebellion, which is sneaking out to hang out with your friends. But they've lost that privilege in some cities because of the increase in crime rates. Again, Newark, D.C. have both seen youth offenders increase pretty significantly. And obviously, it's not ideal to target a population. But when the statistics are trending in a certain direction, in lieu of doing the exact thing that you're worried about, which is over-criminalizing or increasing police presence or funding more police, which I think would solve a lot of the issue. We obviously disagree on that. We've discussed that before. But in lieu of doing all of those things, a curfew kind of seems like the bare minimum non-criminalization effort that you could implement in order to try to make some changes. Because obviously addressing root causes of why youth are committing crimes takes a lot longer, takes a lot more creativity, probably takes a lot more money. In the short term, it seems like this is probably the right move for Newark to implement, and I wouldn't be surprised to see other cities follow suit. Unfortunately, we're out of time on this, but we're going to be back with more Rising after this.